And welcome back, everybody. We are here for our fifth stream match between Canada and Australia for our second semi-finals, which, of course, we did get confirmation, if you were here tuning in with us 5 to 10 minutes ago, that Team Canada has indeed progressed on to the finals, which is going to be taking place next weekend and is going to be versus Thailand, of course. So at the minute, the scores are 4-0 for Team Canada versus Team Australia. There have been a couple of very close sets if you haven't tuned in already, which we have gone over. But we are here for the fifth one. And joining me is Hayden. How are we doing?
Yeah, I'm very excited to get to cast these next few games, and also just overwhelmingly impressed with Canada. If you look at the match scores here, it looks like it was very much a landslide victory for Canada, that they won 8 of the last 9 games, but every single one of those games felt so hard won, and it required such phenomenal play from the players. And I'm really excited to get to showcase a little bit more of both sides of this stream, because the players here really are just spectacular.
Well, exactly that, and we've got some heavy weight players as well, still yet to come for this stream. So we're going to have Kylan van Severen versus Christopher Khan for our fifth match. We've got a lot of information with the sort of teams that both of these, both Team Canada and Team Australia have been kind of using, their compositions, and we've sort of seen a bit of a preference with, I would say mostly a water type restricted with Zacian from Team Canada's side, excluding the last one, which was a Zacian and a Groudon team, which the Sun team just like blew everything apart essentially. But I'd be quite curious to see what each of the trainers are deciding to bring now, since this is chronological order, right? So from this point, we already know that Team Canada's won and has progressed on to the finals next week. But what are each trainer's options? Are they just going to go for something a bit more fun? Are they going to go for still serious? They want to try to get that record going for themselves, stay positive. So I'm interested to see what we're actually going to be seeing coming up.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question that players have now. Like, once the set is decided, like, what are the terms on which you want to win or lose in this end? And you have such a phenomenal opportunity to practice something that maybe you want to bring against Thailand, against a brilliant player like Christopher Khan. Mm-hmm. But you also have the opportunity to try to preserve information, to try to just take a breather and reset and prepare, because Thailand is a terrifying opponent, and there's going to be such an extraordinary finals between these two teams. And so there's a lot of thought going into the players on what they bring here.
Yeah, 100%. As we're going to be having both of the players' profiles pop up right here. We're going to start things off with Kylan's side of things. Kylan so far is actually his first time being featured on stream. He did not take part in last year's World Cup, but this year's record so far is looking to be a 4 wins, 3 losses. So average to good. Obviously, I think Kylan so far, the fact that he's won a game with Greedent last week, I think speaks a lot about what kind of team we may be seeing coming to power from himself.
Yeah, very terrifying to see players who can just wield so many different Pokemon so well. And awesome accomplishments there. It's so fun to see seniors players rising up to play with all of the different competition here, with like a ton of World Championships finishes. A top 4 in 2022, 3 times World's competitor, an Indianapolis Regional Champion this year, and a New Jersey Regionals top 4. Those are all really impressive plays, especially from a younger player. There's such a bright future ahead for Kylan, and facing off against such an amazing player in Christopher Khan.
100%. Like, I mean, I think there are kind of situations where you feel like, oh no, I'm going to feel a bit more stressed or anxious about going up against a well-known player that's been in the community like for years, like ever since forever. But there's also that sort of situation where you're taking this into your stride and saying, no, this is going to be an additional learning step or more of an experience step. I want to go up against a really good player. I want to see how they play, and I want to do the best that I can to try to get that result that I want. Essentially to get to. So I think it's a really cool opportunity for Kylan to go ahead and bout it now that there's less pressure in this field, and you just focus a bit more on the plays and not the environmental situations going on with the pressure, the external pressures and such. And we do actually have the teams pop up for us now, Hayden.
Yeah, so as you predicted, riding that wave, there's a lot of Kyogres here. We've got Calyrex versus Zacian is the other restricted choice. And then a relatively different team composition. I've been happening to cast a lot of Whimsicott matches, and this is no exception. It's a really extraordinarily flexible Pokemon for these sorts of formats, there's just so many different things it can do. Even if you've scouted a team, you have no way to tell if what that Whimsicott set is until it starts using its attacks. And so really cool to see those tools like the Tailwind plus Kyogre, and then a pretty different supporting cast besides from that.
Yeah, I mean, we do have the Shedinja from Chris's side, and I believe that's a personal composition of his own. So that's Christopher's own composition. So I'm quite interested to see what sort of like little technical differences that has with either the moves or maybe the training and each of the sets of going into these Pokemon. So I'd be quite interested to see how this plays up against Kylan's team. Matchup wise, it's very interesting. I think this is reminiscent to a team that we saw in the beginning of the series. At least I know personally I used quite a lot myself, this particular 6. So I'd be quite interested to see how Christopher's team pairs up against this female Indeedee, which for some reason I think is going to be a pivotal sort of Pokemon going into this matchup.
Yeah, it's really interesting. This Shedinja is terrifying for Kylan to be facing down. There's only one Pokemon that I would be like 100% sure is going to have a super effective move into it. Oh, L2 with the Calyrex Shadow. But definitely it has so many options to be able to cause so many problems, but also you have Indeedee to redirect any ghost attack it uses to send out spread moves, so you don't really care if they're redirected. Definitely it could be a pivotal Pokemon in this match.
As we are going to be getting the leads, ladies and gents, we're going to be seeing the battle from Kylan's perspective, which is on the left, and Christopher's perspective on the right. Leads-wise, of course, we do have Kylan going with the Whimsicott Regieleki, and Christopher is going with the Whimsicott of his own, as well as the Zacian. So more of an offensive sort of lead, as opposed to Regieleki, which, yes, to be honest, it can definitely be offensive if it is rocking that Life Orb, and it has that modest training to mean that it has a very good chance of picking up a KO on any sort of Zacians, but it could also be there for the additional speed control support.
Yeah, it's definitely a big question how this Regieleki is trained and what it's going to be able to do in this situation. We are seeing a Dynamax come out right away, so maybe it is aiming for more of that offense, even if the set isn't designed for that all the time. Really taking advantage of the fact that it's faster than the Zacian is going to be able to do a lot of damage, while these Whimsicotts are probably going to be able to keep pace with each other in terms of the speed.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think pace is the name of the game when it comes to hyper-offensive speed control-based compositions. So it's kind of similar to what we're seeing right now. The Whimsicott goes for the taunt Prankster first, which means it stops Christopher's Whimsicott Prankster from actually moving and unable to go for the light screen there, as we did quickly spot. And we've got Regieleki following up with a max airstream going into that Whimsicott. It will actually be proccing a Cobra Berry, which will be halving the amount of super effective flying type move coming out from this Regieleki, which of course does seem to have been sourced from that bounce pre-Dynamax form. And we're going to be seeing the Zacian go for the Behemoth Blade right now from Christopher's side into that Regieleki. Ooh, not quite enough to pick up the KO, but my lord, 52 hit points is not feeling quite good for this bouncy, cheerful Regieleki.
Yeah, really nice call from Christopher Khan getting that Behemoth Blade off. Really nice to just stop that Regieleki from steamrolling. It still hasn't gotten to do much offense. It's just setting up the speed right now for its side of the field. But what an extraordinary interaction. I said Whimsicott was flexible. I didn't expect to see it was that flexible. The time into the Whimsicott, stopping even any option of Tailwind and then doing speed control, and the Whimsicott being this incredibly bulky Cobra Berry set, that totally changes the way I was expecting these Whimsicotts to interact. And now Christopher still has the option to like pivot the Whimsicott out and bring it back in for Tailwind later, and has done a lot of damage. So even though Kylan has the speed advantage, there's definitely tools Christopher still has to flip this game around from this like turn 1 that seemed a little bit off.
Oh, 100%. I think the fact that you've still got your Zacian at a very healthy sort of position pays dividends to entering the mid to end game sort of level of board state right now, as we are going to be seeing Christopher actually wanting to reserve, or should I say preserve, that Whimsicott. Goes for the switch out for this Shedinja, which of course coincidentally gets onto the field the moment that this Calyrex Shadow Rider does, but Max Airstream isn't what you want to be seeing going into this Shedinja slot, is it, Hal Hayden?
I know, I said only a couple Pokemon might be able to hit Shedinja super effectively. Really eating my words here. This is indeed one of the Airstream variants. And being able to break that Focus Sash right away on Shedinja is so strong. I think for Christopher's side, the Whimsicott's still more important to preserve, but definitely tough to lose that Focus Sash.
Oh, 100%, because what if you're Christopher right now, you're just playing out to the board state, right? You're just trying to preserve Whimsicott for a future sort of mid-game scenario to end game in order to establish and get a second Tailwind up, or maybe if you have access to any sort of additional speed control moves to go for those as well. So it's more of a positional gameplay right now that we're observing. Regieleki is just going to go ahead and utilize his final Dynamax move, maybe wants to go ahead either to get a Max Darkness set up, predict if there's going to be an ally switch coming out from the Shedinja or not, and then just capitalize off of a follow-up from an Astral Barrage, potentially single target if he gets the correct slot right.
Yeah, absolutely. So much pressure going out against Christopher Khan on this particular turn. That Shedinja does have some options to maybe Shadow Sneak, but we are seeing that Zacian withdraw, sending out that Whimsicott, deciding, okay, it's more important to have the Zacian around later than anything else. And Shedinja going for Endure, so even with max moves, it's going to be okay.
Oh, wow, it is indeed. As we had seen the Max Darkness, does actually go into the Whimsicott slot, so wanted to maybe anticipate an ally switch play coming out there instead of what we did actually see Christopher opt for, as it goes into the Whimsicott, not very effective, but it does drop that special defense stage by 1 on both the Whimsicott and the Shedinja, which of course won't be affecting the Shedinja that much. It will definitely be affecting that Whimsicott, as this Calyrex now is going to be profiting off of a Grim Neigh boost, being able to go ahead and boost itself up now to +1 of its special attack. But Max Airstream has not been set on Kylan's Calyrex, if I'm not mistaken, correct, Hayden? Or has it?
Yeah, I believe it has not. That was the Max Darkness we saw there. Oh, it switched in as the Airstream went out into Shedinja, so I think it has one.
Okay.
But either way, going to be the fastest thing on the field now, because Chris just lost the one Tailwind option that you have, and that's so tough.
Yeah. Well, exactly that, and I think it all did stem down a bit to the turn 1 sort of scenario where we saw Kylan's Whimsicott's Taunt actually move first, stop Christopher from getting a light screen set up. Obviously, this is something that Christopher needs to take into account. He wanted to try to get to a position where he gets rid of the Whimsicott on Kylan's side in order to allow for a Tailwind mid-game to end game to sort of try to bring this back for himself. But yeah, he's lost that opportunity right now, or that choice, should I say, as he is going to be switching the Shedinja out for the Zacian, maybe wanting to capitalize off of future switch-ins in anticipation of any sort of moves that could be coming out from Kylan's Pokemon, let's say super effective onto a Kyogre, for example. As talking about Kyogre, we've got a big whale coming onto the field right now, wanting to dish out big damage as well, but this, I'd be a bit wary because Kylan's Pokemon seem to be a bit superpowered right now.
Yeah, there's going to be so much damage coming out into Chris on this turn. Regieleki does knock itself out with a Wild Charge, but I think you're pretty happy with that trade. Getting so much damage off of on that Kyogre, and the Astral Barrage might just take 2 KOs. Not quite on the Zacian, but it is enough for that Kyogre, and Chris is in a really tough spot to be able to do anything for the rest of this game with this Calyrex sitting here. +2 special attack. Probably +1 speed as well. It does have to worry about a Shadow Sneak from Shedinja, but that's about it. And there's still so many Pokemon on Kylan's side of the field. Really tough for Christopher to need to figure out a way to adjust here.
I think so, and I think you pointed out quite nicely there, Hayden. It seems like Shadow Sneak should be the play that this Calyrex fears, right? Does it get KO'd from a Shadow Sneak, though? Is it within the sort of realm of possibility for there to be a correct sort of training that's established, or let's say a nature on a Shedinja? Does that come into play? Is there any sort of bulk that's on this Calyrex Shadow Rider? Because so far we've only seen it click the Astral Barrage button. That's it. It's not going for anything else. It's like, I don't want to play around. I just want to deal damage. That's what I'm here for. So I think Kylan needs to be a bit wary of that scenario, but it still feels like he's in such a phenomenal spot to be able to go ahead and clinch up this game 1.
Kylan flashing the brilliant stat boost that he's accomplished with his Calyrex here, showing off a little bit for us. Able to just threaten so much pressure here, and maybe a critical hit Shadow Sneak would be a concern. Maybe Christopher is going to be able to confirm how much damage he's doing, but definitely aside from this sort of awkward interaction, it definitely feels like Kylan has so many tools here, and it does feel like Christopher's playing more for like the information about the damage rolls than for being able to bring this back, unless something goes really his way. And we do see the Calyrex Shadow Rider switch out, so maybe there is a way.
If there's a will, there's a way, right? As we had to be seeing the Shadow Sneak going into that Calyrex Shadow Rider, what was at least that slot, and is now the Kyogre, and the Whimsicott's Energy Ball will be enough to pick up the KO on Zacian, so Kylan's all but gone ahead and hopefully guaranteed this win for himself. I think it does come down to whether this Shedinja can accomplish a Shadow Sneak Oko onto the Calyrex Shadow Rider, because I don't think there's anything Kyogre and Whimsicott can actually do to touch this Shedinja.
Yeah, this is a really awkward endgame. I'm going to sort of just confess, I don't know what the calculation is on that Shedinja. I'm not super familiar with my offensive Shedinja calcs. But I think that it's definitely tough. If that Shadow Sneak is a KO on the Calyrex, then there might not be a way to do damage to the Shedinja ever. And you might just need to... This might be a while that we're going to be playing this game to try to figure out if the Shedinja has a way back in or not. But that taunt is going to help a fair bit.
Potential spoilers from Hayden there, clearly, as we're going to be seeing the taunt to go into the Shedinja there. Just wanting to make sure that it can't get any sort of setup moves going for itself. It will instead now be going for the Poltergeist from Shedinja's side into the Kyogre, dealing massive amount of damage here. And I think if you're Kylan, sorry, you have to kind of prioritize what you need to do and limit your opponent's win cons as much as possible. So I don't know, but in this tough scenario, I would personally expect that the Shadow Sneak from the Shedinja should not pick up a KO onto a Calyrex Shadow Rider. It'll deal subliminally amount or a great amount of the damage, maybe at 80 to 95%, even less. But I think a critical hit may be needed. From my personal experience. But we're just going to see a situation right now where the Kyogre and the Whimsicott are just going ahead and going to be clicking buttons into that Shedinja's Wonder Guard, of course not dealing damage, and kind of trying to stall out the best situation as possible, right? Because that is essentially your win con versus this Shedinja, excluding or barring any sort of RNG.
Yeah, I think definitely there's this sort of way to try to get the Calyrex in eventually, but also try to figure out what that trade-off is. I really do like, though, how even if we're just playing to a critical hit, and I'm really not sure, Christopher is leveraging that to such a huge extent and going for those Poltergeists, seeing every item on Kylan's team, getting as much information as he can for this endgame, because there's really not a safe way for Kylan to pivot this Calyrex back in. You have to let something faint. And so there's all these forced reveals of items that I think Christopher can really leverage going forwards to get a little bit more information. Like, whether or not that Shadow Sneak gets a KO, Christopher is playing this well to get as much information as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Kylan does have to kind of wager in on trying to time stall as much as possible, at least for now, and hope that Christopher doesn't get the correct sort of switches that he needs. But this is essentially, like you mentioned, Hayden, I think a sort of information game, whilst also maybe cheekily saying, what is my win con in this scenario? Do I have one? Whilst, going through the sort of exploration of information. So I think it should be going to Kylan, barring any sort of critical hits or Okos onto the Calyrex Shadow Rider, but it seems like we're in for a bit of time that's going to be passing by, but hey, we're here for more action, right?
I'm going to go ahead and cheat and look up this damage calc, see what exactly we're dealing with here. Right, cool. But definitely just sort of sitting and seeing if players are playing to time or if they're playing to like information or something else.
Yeah, as we are going to be seeing the Kyogre actually get the double protector, which does mean that the Poltergeist, once again, trying to focus into the Kyogre, should surely pick up the KO from that range, does not. And I think in this scenario, if Kylan was playing 100% to time, I would have expected him to try to utilize as much of his actual Your Time as possible that's available. But he may be a bit worried about how much is left and not actually self-timing his own self, based on the slower sort of progression of time across his plays too. As we're going to be seeing the Shedinja just go ahead, and it does finally go ahead, pick up the KO onto this Kyogre, and finally, we've got a situation where it's just going to be Calyrex Shadow Rider finally facing off versus its arch nemesis, Shedinja.
So Kylan doing everything he can to handle, even if there's a critical hit. But if there's not, this Calyrex definitely would be able to survive. We finally know for sure. I don't have to guess anymore. And just some really interesting thinking of, there are a lot of questions about how much time should I take to make this a guaranteed win instead of a mostly a win. And that's definitely, like, Kylan has some tough calls on making sure that you don't time out and making sure that you also play to time. Although, we are seeing Kylan hover over some other options, so I'm not sure, but it seems like this Astral Barrage would just finish off this game. We're just going to have to see if that critical hit Christopher's been playing to for the last 5-10 minutes is going to pan out, or if we're going to get to that next game with Christopher getting relevant information.
onto your seats, everybody. This is going to be a wild one. As T-10, or should I say less right now, to what we find out will be a crit or will not be a crit. Let us see, as Shedinja does go for the Shadow Sneak into the Calyrex Shadow Rider. Oh, and it just survives on 16 hit points, which of course does mean that the critical hit needed to land if you're Christopher. Still playing to his win con, so complete fair play from him there. Obviously, like you mentioned, Hayden, gathering more information too. I think the assumption that this Calyrex Shadow Rider may be choice locked would be a very fair one to make, as we didn't see anything else come out from it, and we just saw it deal, huge, substantial amounts of damage, especially with its boost passed over. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it picked up a KO at +1 onto a maxed Kyogre, so which is, we both know that it's very bulky when it comes to its special defense.
Yeah, I think we know because we have the privilege of seeing like the exact slots when they're selected and can see that little item slot that it is specs. Yeah. But you're right that absolutely Christopher probably is assuming the same thing based on the damage. It did 90 to 95% to his Zacian just with +1. That's definitely not something you expect a Calyrex to do normally. Yeah. And so being able to get that information is really useful. I think also a really interesting interaction we saw there, that the Shedinja, even though it's countered by the Calyrex, if you get any chip onto it, suddenly it's a totally different game. And so I think there's a lot that both players, it took a while for them to sort of take time and feel each other out and think what they want to do next. But there's really a lot of interesting interactions to unpack in this next game. And I'm really excited to see how the players adjust.
Oh, 100%. Because I think, like you said, if that Shedinja is in a situation where it doesn't have its Focus Sash broken, it just checkmates that Calyrex Shadow Rider. And as long as any sort of damage is dealt onto it, checkmates, because it's not the priority, right? So I think, like you said, there's a lot of little different intricacies and permutations of board states that we could actually be observing coming into this game too. But of course, that's left to be seen. We're going to go ahead and try to get into that as soon as we can and check out those leads, which are going to be the Zacian and Whimsicott over on Christopher's side. And over on Kylan's side, we're going to be seeing the female Indeedee and Kyogre adaptation.
We've been seeing Canada do this a lot, not going with the same plan as Game 1, even after a win, and just trying to adjust a little bit and maybe take advantage of momentum. But Christopher is just going with the exact same lead, maybe with a plan to have adjusted play. And so it means that he's in a really interesting position here. We know that Whimsicott has Light Screen, and it definitely can get it up this time. Mm-hmm. And that might be really, really useful against this Kyogre. The Indeedee has its Psychic Seed activate, it's got Special Bulk, but that's not going to really help it against the Behemoth Blade. And so the Zacian is in prime position to start doing a lot of damage, and it's not immediately threatened with a KO because of that Whimsicott set.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in this situation, if you're Kylan, obviously you saw the light screen being set up from before, but you're thinking, okay, well, I do have a female Indeedee and Kyogre. Surely it should be a very straightforward follow me water spout, but you have to take into consideration which Pokemon is Christopher going to target. Is he going to expect the female Indeedee follow me and just go for the Behemoth Blade into it regardless, or play rough? Or is he actually going to try to go for the Kyogre and be sneaky about it just in case there is no follow me and there's any sort of helping hand coming out?
I think that's a point. It always looks so simple when we see the Indeedee click follow me and redirect it, and then Christopher's definitely going to attack into that because it was redirected. But there really are so many mind games that go into that. I mean, we watched Kylan alternating between a lot of choices because there really are a lot of ways. And it looks like, based on that play Wrath going off, it looks like Christopher might really have been targeting the Kyogre. And so a really nice call to still go with the textbook play. And that Ice Beam not KOing the Whimsicott, Light Screen really putting in work.
Wow, it really does, doesn't it? And I think it kind of pays dividends to why Christopher has Light Screen on that Whimsicott too. And we saw, unfortunately for himself, he wasn't able to get that up in Game 1. But my lord, that obviously means we've got a situation where Christopher will be taking advantage of speed control shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. Christopher's in position to keep using this Whimsicott in a really great way, but Kylan's going to be able to get off this Dynamax, I believe. That's got to be the Kyogre based on the Pokeballs, based on the fact that he used it to HP. Pretty confident. And so this Kyogre's going to be able to do a lot, but Light Screen plus Tailwind is a really big threat.
Yeah, it really, really is, isn't it? And I think, especially with this Kyogre now just going ahead and threatening with a helping hand Max Geyser into this Zacian, which does not protect, by the way. Sure, Whimsicott has set up its own Tailwind right now, but Zacian is quite pivotal. We know how good of a Pokemon it is. We know it's pretty much busted, and if you have it, you got a really good chance of certain matchups and we know that it's not going to be able to pick up a KO on this Kyogre. So I think helping hand to sort of negate the light screen being set up from Christopher's side makes a lot of sense, and it is going to allow Kylan to just go ahead and pick up the Zacian with a critical hit, which personally I don't think matters at all, because you've got the Life Orb, you're still in the rain, so it should be fine. That's a guaranteed. I think Mystic Water mostly does that as well, unless you're up against a very, very insanely bulky Zacian. But regardless, we got a situation where Kylan does have Dynamax going, but has taken down the Zacian, but there's a lot of resource that's been spent from Kylan's side. We've got Dynamax, and we've got both of his Pokemon being quite unhealthy when it comes to their hit points.
It's always the interesting trade that playing Whimsicott or another Tailwind setter in a restricted format has, that you really have to decide what trades are going to let you get to a winning position versus not. And Christopher's happened to lose the Zacian. I don't think that was maybe the best outcome for him. That helping hand getting through that light screen, even without that crit, would have been really tough. But being able to set up so that this Kyogre's out with Tailwind up for 3 more turns against 2 lower HP Pokemon is really strong positioning from Christopher.
Yeah, it really is, as we're going to actually be seeing the Whimsicott opting to switch out for this Shedinja now. So, once again, Shedinja's on the field, just wanting to say hi. And also, none of your moves are going to be hitting me unless they're super effective. So, we're going to be seeing Christopher go ahead and get that Dynamax going for the Kyogre, just wanting to go ahead and push out that pressure, that offensive pressure, back onto Kylan right now, with a very healthy Kyogre hidden behind a light screen, which is so good for Christopher right now. As we are going to be seeing Kylan's Kyogre go for the max guard and get completely ignored, as the KO will be picked up onto this female Indeedee.
Such an interesting turn to see a Dynamax just to do 10 damage to an Indeedee, but it really did make a lot of sense to try to make sure that you can handle whatever the Kyogre throws at you, even if it's Max Lightning, and to get rid of that Indeedee. It really catches this max guard play that Kylan went for. Just a wonderful read from Christopher. And now this Kyogre is not just protected in Tailwind. It's not just protected by Light Screen, but also you can't safely target it anymore because this Shedinja might have, well, definitely has Ally Switch. And being able to make that a tougher call is a really interesting thing that Christopher has on his side of the field.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think you're pretty much throwing if you're not running Ally Switch on Shedinja, to be honest. But I think in a scenario like you well put, Hayden, we've got Christopher kind of being at an awkward situation where do you go for the Ally Switch? Do you not? What sort of plays do you expect Kylan to lean into? And how can you better take advantage of it with your own Kyogre right now, which is in max, which is very, very healthy, and it is protected by Light Screen.
Also now protected by a max guard, so definitely safe. And Shedinja's using Endure. I suppose the value here is that you get to stall out the last turn of Dynamax from Kyogre, and that's really cool. But I'm really interested to see that because Christopher's now losing another turn of Tailwind momentum that he currently has.
Yeah, exactly. And very importantly there, worth noting, the Focus Sash isn't actually proc there, is it? So Christopher has been able to actually preserve the Focus Sash, if I'm not mistaken, and in a situation actually flip the table completely in his favor when it comes to, once again, the resource availability right now. You've got the Landorus, which, sure, maybe it could go for a switch, maybe it goes for a fly to avoid any sort of max geysers into that slot, but can you completely ignore Kylan's Kyogre in this situation? Pretty much, because what is really there for the Kyogre to do other than maybe target correctly and get a Thunder Para on the Kyogre over on Christopher's side?
Absolutely. Landorus protecting, maybe hoping that the Kyogre is ignored, and then Kyogre also protecting, just burning that Tailwind. So Christopher no longer has Tailwind, but I really want to call it, I think you were right with that resource management. Max Geyser does still get to go off into this Landorus to do a ton of damage. That's just a KO through Protect. Wow.
Yeah, Landorus just came to say hi, everybody. He wanted to hide, but, you know, Christopher's Kyogre said, no, not today. And we got the situation where it just picks up a raw one-hit KO through Protect, Obviously, it is Life Orb boosted, and that Landorus does not have an AV and Protect available to itself to somehow save itself in that scenario. But we got the situation now, Hayden, where we got Calyrex Shadow Rider on Kylan's side, which is available and is on the field, but Christopher does have that light screen set up, which means, as well as the Focus Sash has not been broken. So this is actually really strong for Christopher if you're him right now.
I think the piece that you mentioned about really preserving resources is absolutely the name of the game of how Christopher played this. He's managed to get himself into just an extraordinary position here. We saw before that if Shedinja still has its Sash against the Calyrex, it's in a great situation. So even if it were just Shedinja, this game would be over. And you've also got the Kyogre sitting here, able to threaten in a number of different ways. And so even with that Intimidate, that Shadow Sneak really a strong option. Although we are going to see a trick coming up from that Calyrex. Really interesting.
Oh, okay. So this is Kylan's response to being choice locked. It's like, no, you have the choice item right now. I just want to go ahead and actually have any other sort of like choice of going for moves. Now, it would be quite, like big-brained if you somehow had Protect on the Calyrex, but that's not going to really matter in this situation, is it? Because the Kyogre is going to be able to connect both of its Origin Pulse hits onto both of Kylan's Pokemon and force us into a Game 3 in such a very, very interesting, beautiful way, I would say.
Yeah, I really want to call it a subtlety I don't think we got to mention when we were casting. That third turn where the Kyogre went for Max Guard, even though there was so much Tailwind momentum and the like, it really was just like the deciding point of this game because it blocked a Max Hailstorm from that Kyogre. And you could have also ally switched to block the Max Hailstorm, but if you get that guess wrong and Hail goes up, you definitely lose, or you're in a really bad spot because Shedinja just is lost. And so Christopher just managing to play to this position where Shedinja was perfectly safe in the end game, and somehow a counter to a Pokemon that has super effective attacks on it was just incredible play. And I knew Christopher was an amazing player. I just love seeing it every time he pulls something out like that.
100%, and I think we all do. Don't worry. So I think being able to see that is like that sort of like play and thought being put into not only your current turn, but the remainder of the turns and the sort of like the board flow and the board state at the minute. So just being able to say, okay, I know that I can win if I rule out this, this, and this. How can I reach that? By doing this. Cool. All right, let's just get to it. And that's sort of what we saw coming out from Christopher, and be able to force this Game 3. So I'm quite interested to see how Kylan's going to try to adapt to this. Obviously, he knows that Christopher is leaning on Shedinja and sort of the plays that he can play around with, either the Endure, as we've seen both in Game 1 and Game 2, and trying to checkmate, like we were talking about at the end of Game 1, that Calyrex Shadow Rider, and just be able to make sure that, right, Shedinja has to come. It needs to be there. I just need to be able to time the correct turns it needs to be in play in order to take advantage and sort of win this game out. So do you think that there's going to be any sort of focus from Kylan in trying to limit the Shedinja plays in any way that he can?
Yeah, I think there's so many different options for handling that. We saw the trick there where if it happens too early and you lock the Shedinja to Shadow Sneak, maybe the other Pokemon can still win. And we also are seeing this in DD, and I really like this because once you have the Psychic terrain up, you don't have to worry about that Shadow Sneak. And I think it's a really strong adjustment from Kylan to just start with the two Pokemon that really in combination can cause so much trouble for Christopher's side of the field.
Yeah, and I do actually really like this sort of adaptation because it kind of makes sense. You know that at least the female Indeedee should not be going down to a play rough if it connects, right? Now, Behemoth Blade, that's a bit different. But in this scenario, at least, you got the plays of, okay, is there going to be a focus from the Zacian into the Calyrex Shadow Rider? Is it going to go into the Indeedee? Can I take advantage if I'm Kylan with a Protect play from the Indeedee and just be cheeky and get an Astral Barrage off? Whilst you have the other side of the coin where you got Psychic Terrain on the field. That is what you need to stop this Shedinja from going for Shadow Sneak. So you need to be able to preserve the female Indeedee for mid to end game, if you're me.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a huge amount of resources that you need to preserve going forwards. Right now, we're seeing Indeedee trying to negate the Whimsicott, which is really interesting, using that Helping Hand to counteract the Light Screen. A really risky call, but it pays off because this Astral Barrage does get to go off. Zacian didn't attack first in Tailwind, and now you do get damage that is equivalent to what would have happened if you hadn't had that Light Screen up, and Behemoth Blade comes back afterwards into this Calyrex instead of before it got to attack.
Oh, and it does go ahead and actually pick up the KO. So Christopher wasn't playing around. He's like, yeah, I know there's a potential female Indeedee protect play, but I still need to cover my bases. I want to focus down on the Calorit Shadow Rider in any sort of events of any sort of cheeky plays being played out from Kylan there. So well played, wanted to play safe, it works, and it makes a lot of sense. As we are going to be seeing Kylan now actually bring Landorus Therian onto the field, which of course is going to have Intimidate. It's going to drop that Zacian now from +1 to neutral of its attack, and it may have potential of setup if it has Sword Stance available to itself and maybe be the Dynamax candidate as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting that Kylan has lost a Pokemon that was instrumental in the previous 2 games, and that's really tough. But you also do get to set up this really interesting momentum where Landorus can just do so many different things here. And we are seeing a Protect from that Indeedee. Like you called out a turn earlier. Maybe it's going to get this call right, but either way, a lot that this Landorus can do.
Oh, yes, indeed. As the Behemoth Blade does go into that female Indeedee, Earthquake is going to be able to come out right now and both land, of course, on the Windscott, pick up the KO, as well as the Zacian. And yes, we do have Tailwind available from Christopher's side, which will be a bit to Landorus Therian's detrimental use, because you do not want to be facing the Kyogre under Tailwind if you're this Lando, right? So I guess it depends on what the fourth Pokemon, should I say, on Christopher's side is, which it is actually the Shedinja. So I'm not sure, Hayden, if Kylan can still find a way around this and maybe still go for the safe Follow Me in anticipation of a Max Geyser coming out from the Kyogre, or just maybe hope to go for a Max Rockfall, pick off that Shedinja, and make the correct call.
Yeah, it's really interesting, this game. It feels like Kylan's made the best read that he could have every turn, but Christopher just keeps playing into these successively better positions that, like, even if you redirect, if that Kyogre goes for Water Spout instead, you're in such a tough position. And so Kylan really forced to just keep making reads and hope that something will work out. But it's really just extraordinarily well played to get to this position. Chris, sure, you're down a Pokemon. That's totally fine here.
Yeah, exactly that. So I think this is going to wager on if a Water Spout can pick up this Landorus Therian. But of course, let's find out, as I'm sure we will shortly. There is no Dynamax from Christopher's Pokemon and his side. We are going to be seeing a Follow Me from this female Indeedee. So Christopher is banking on this KO, and he's going to get it, ladies and gents. He goes ahead, picks up the KO. In what fashion as well, under Tailwind, in the rain, not leaving anything to chance with that Life Orb boosted Water Spout.
Yeah, just Landorus is such an extraordinary Pokemon in almost every single format, and it's still great in this one, but it's so telling that just the existence of Kyogre makes it so much harder to use properly. And having that situation where you just get the one shot from Water Spout, it really didn't feel like Kylan had an option other than to hope it was the Max Geyser instead. And just, you do get the Regieleki in now, and that gives you some options, maybe, if you can guess things right. But losing your Dynamax without even attacking is just such a tough spot for Kylan to be in.
It really is, and now that we do actually have the Regieleki revealed, I'm starting to question whether Landorus should have Dynamaxed there. I feel like Regieleki surely should have been the Dynamax candidate, and maybe you could go for, let's say, either a Protect play with the female Indeedee, maybe to add a bit more of longevity to the Regieleki under Dynamax form or not, and just kind of play around with either Max Darknesses or Max Lightnings, and you force the sort of ally switch game. But, what could have been, and we're in the situation that we are now. We've got the Kyogre going for the max right now, female Indeedee going for the helping hand, so Kylan is hoping to try to focus down and pick off the right slot, which he does, and he just misses the KO. Oh my lord.
Is this Kyogre going to faint to the Life Orb recoil? We don't know yet. But it is carrying that Indeedee, and so presumably the Shedinja is going to be able to pick up the Regieleki. Also, regardless, so if that had been a KO, this would have been a totally different game. If it had just done a little bit more so that Life Orb wasn't what picked up that KO. But now it looks like the Shedinja might just be in prime position to be able to close this out with a Poltergeist.
If it does connect this Poltergeist, which it did this time, yes, it definitely did, and it will be going ahead, picking up that KO, and all of a sudden, we've got Christopher going ahead and completing the comeback, at least with this set, and going ahead and giving Australia their first set win versus Canada. So we've got 4-1 currently right now for Canada versus Australia. And Christopher just going ahead and just playing exceptionally well and just showing a very good, thorough understanding of board states and sort of win cons that you have to kind of go for, and really playing to that Shedinja as well. That end duel is so broken, and I think Team France will know all about that as well.
Yeah, Shedinja, so much respect for it at this point. It's done a ton of really good work for Christopher. I really just want to say I love that these players are still playing so dedicatedly, even if maybe the week is decided. Being able to really get all of these amazing opportunities to play between brilliant players is so special. And I'm sure that these players are walking out of the set with some notes and experience that are really going to help them going forwards. I'm sure Kylan is thinking, is there a way maybe I could have done it Dynamax differently? If only I'd gotten that roll on Wild Charge. Like, it was at no point was there like a decisive, like, oh, this slide's definitely for sure going to win. And I think it's so neat to see games like that, where even if the stakes are different, there's still so many really good games from brilliant players.
100%. And I think this is kind of like these are the sort of stuff that we look to try to keep on going within the community and VGC community as a whole. I think there's a lot of these sort of like intricate sort of interactions that are kind of underrated. And they really shouldn't be. I think it's just not us calling them out as much, and maybe us just trotting on, getting on with the stuff. But I think these are sort of foundations that help improve and grow our community as a whole. And I think it's a really good sort of a stepping stone to see the seriousness from both of these trainers. They just want to go ahead. They want to go for the win. They don't want to hold back. They want to do the best that they can. And seeing Kylan do so well versus Christopher gives me very good hopes of his continuation of his growth within VGC. So it's very, very good stuff. Very happy to see.
Absolutely. When I was a seniors player just moving into masters, it was so extraordinarily helpful to have the opportunity to play brilliant players in just like incredibly high stakes online tournaments. There's so much you can learn from that. And so it's really exciting to see this incredibly promising player having that opportunity to play against a veteran of the field and really learn so much more. Himself already a veteran, but learning a little bit more about the game. Really exciting. I couldn't have said it better myself. So much foundations of the community being continued to be built here. Please don't go anywhere. We have 2 more wonderful matches to show you. If these past 5 matches are any judge, they'll be incredible. So make sure you stay right there, and we'll be right back with the next set.